Hey everyone, ready to boost that business English?
Oh, yeah.
Whether you're, thinking of launching a startup, climbing that corporate ladder, or just want to sound, more confident at work, this deep dive is for you.
Absolutely.
We're going to be breaking down a recent podcast episode that was jam-packed with essential business vocab and phrases.
That's right.
We're like your guides, sifting through all the info and finding those real gems.
Exactly. We'll equip you with all the tools you need to navigate those business conversations, with fluency and, well, a bit of finesse, too.
So let's start with the basics. The podcast hosts, they started by defining entrepreneur, but they went a bit deeper than just, the dictionary definition.
Yeah, they did. It's not just about starting any business.
Right.
It's about seeing those unmet needs in the market and then having the courage to take a risk.
That's a really interesting way to look at it.
Yeah.
It's not just about the business itself, it's about spotting that gap and coming up with a solution.
Exactly. And often with limited resources.
Right.
And a lot of uncertainty. Think of someone like Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx.
Oh, yeah.
She saw a need for, comfortable and flattering undergarments, and she took a huge risk.
Huge.
Investing her own savings to create a product that, revolutionized the industry.
It's amazing how some of the biggest businesses out there, they started with, a simple observation and a willingness to just go for it.
Yeah, just take that leap of faith.
Now, the podcast also talked about revenue.
Yeah.
Expenses. These terms, I feel like they're everywhere, but could you break them down for someone who's not, a financial whiz?
Sure. So revenue is basically the income a company makes from its operations.
Okay.
So it's the money coming in from selling their products or services.
Makes sense.
And expenses, well, those are the costs of running the business.
Right.
So things like, salaries, rent, marketing, all those production costs.
So keeping those expenses in check is key for, having a good profit margin, right?
Absolutely. A healthy profit margin is essential.
But is there ever a time when focusing too much on maximizing that profit margin could actually backfire?
That's a good question. While profit is important, it's all about finding that balance.
Right.
Because if you're obsessively cutting costs,
right,
well, you might compromise on product quality, or employee morale.
Yeah.
Even customer satisfaction.
Yeah.
And that'll hurt the business in the long run.
That makes a lot of sense. It's not just about profit. It's got to be sustainable and ethical, too.
Exactly.
Now, let's get to those phrases that can make you sound like a total pro in any business setting.
Okay.
The podcast, they started with professional introductions, how to make a good first impression.
Yeah, they emphasize that a lot. They suggested using clear and simple phrases.
Okay.
Like, I'm the CEO of company name. Or if you're in a different role, I work as your job title at company name.
It sounds so simple.
It is.
But sometimes the simple things are the hardest to get right.
Especially when you're nervous.
Exactly, or in a totally new environment. What about those times when you're trying to kick off a meeting and, get everyone focused?
Oh, yeah. Those can be awkward.
The podcast had some good advice for that too, right?
They did. Starting smoothly and professionally is key. Phrases like, let's kick off the meeting, or even just, let's get started.
It's like setting the tone.
Yeah, it sets the tone for a productive discussion.
And, of course, you can't forget teamwork.
Absolutely. Collaboration is key. They suggested phrases like, we need to collaborate on this project, or let's work together to find a solution.
I like that. It's like we're all in this together.
Exactly. Shared responsibility.
But sometimes you need to, put a discussion on hold without derailing the whole meeting.
Right. They had a tip for that.
Yeah.
Instead of just changing the subject, you could say, let's circle back to this later.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, it acknowledges that the topic is important, but maybe not for right now.
Exactly. It's like, okay, we'll come back to this, but let's move on for now. Now, I'm sure a lot of our listeners have been in situations where negotiation was key.
Oh, for sure.
Whether it's like, hashing out a contract or just trying to reach a compromise. Knowing how to say what you want clearly and professionally is super important.
Absolutely. The podcast talked about using clear and direct language when you're negotiating.
Okay.
They suggested something like, we'd like to negotiate the terms of the contract.
So you're not being aggressive, but you're being clear.
Exactly. It opens up the conversation for dialogue and hopefully compromise.
Okay. Things are about to get a little tricky. Ready for some phrasal verbs?
Oh yeah, bring it on. Phrasal verbs, they can be a bit tough,
Yeah.
but they add a lot of nuance to business English.
Right. The podcast focused on a few key ones, starting with follow-up.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. It's all about accountability and making sure things move forward.
It's like you're saying, hey, I'm going to check back in with you.
Yeah, like, I'll follow up with you tomorrow about the next steps.
Yeah.
Shows you're proactive and organized.
And it sets a clear expectation for what's going to happen next.
Exactly.
Now, is there a difference between follow-up with and follow-up on? I always get those mixed up.
Ah, good question. That's the tricky thing about phrasal verbs.
Yeah.
So follow up with usually means you're contacting someone.
Okay.
And follow up on is more about checking the status of something.
Oh, okay. I see.
So you might follow up with a coworker about a task,
Right.
but you'd follow up on the progress of like a whole project.
Okay, so it's like those tiny little details that make a difference.
Huge difference. You want to sound natural and professional.
Exactly. Now, another phrasal verb that's super useful for meetings is bring up.
Yeah, if you want to introduce a new topic or idea,
Okay.
bring up is the way to go. It's polite and still direct.
Keeps things moving.
Exactly. You could say something like, I wanted to bring up the issue of the marketing budget.
That's a good example. And what about when you need to actually schedule a meeting to really dig into a topic?
Well, that setup comes in handy.
Oh, yeah, set up a meeting.
You could say, let's set up a meeting for next week to discuss the proposal in more detail.
It's clear, concise, gets everyone on the same page. But sometimes you get put on the spot and you need a minute to think.
Oh yeah, we've all been there.
They had a lifesaver for those moments. Get back to.
That's a good one. You can politely ask for more time,
Mm.
gather some info or figure out your response.
Yeah.
You could say, I need to review the data and I'll get back to you by the end of the day.
It's a way to avoid making a rash decision or, saying something you might regret later.
Definitely.
Okay, so it feels like we're building a toolkit for confident communication, one phrase at a time.
That's the goal.
But the podcast didn't stop there. They actually put all these phrases into practice.
Yeah, they did some real playing
Oh, cool.
to show how these phrases would work in a real conversation.
I like it. So they imagine like a team meeting about a new project.
Exactly.
Walk me through it. How did they use all those phrases we just talked about?
Well, they started with a classic, let's kick off the meeting by reviewing the agenda.
Okay, nice and professional.
Sets the tone right away. Then they used bring up to introduce those project updates.
Okay, so like, let's bring up the current status of the project, something like that.
Exactly. It's a smooth way to get into the heart of the matter.
And then I bet they talked about teamwork.
Of course. They used phrases like, we need to collaborate more closely with the marketing team on this.
To highlight that it's a team effort.
Exactly.
Now every project has its challenges, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Did they talk about any potential roadblocks in this roleplay?
They did. They imagined a scenario where the team was having a cash flow problem.
Okay.
So they brought it up directly, but in a positive way. They said, we're facing a cash flow issue, so we need to brainstorm some ways to improve our payment processes.
So instead of dwelling on the problem, they're focusing on finding solutions.
Exactly.
Love that. And how did they wrap up the meeting?
They ended on a high note, making sure everyone knew what the next steps were.
Yeah.
And use that follow-up phrase again. I'll follow up with the team next week to review progress. Does that work for everyone?
It's like they're subtly weaving in all these key phrases to create this natural professional flow.
Exactly.
But wait, there's more.
Oh, yeah.
The podcast had one more trick up its sleeve. Business idioms.
Idioms. They're like the spice of business language.
I'm ready to spice things up. What idioms did they talk about?
They started with thinking outside the box to encourage creativity and innovation.
Okay.
It's about challenging those assumptions, and coming up with fresh perspectives.
I like that one. It's a reminder to think beyond the obvious.
Yeah. They also talked about the ball is in your court as a way to subtly shift responsibility.
Okay.
It's like saying, okay, we've given you all the info, now it's your turn to do something.
It's a polite way to say get to work.
Exactly. And then there's on the same page, which is so important for making sure everyone understands and agrees.
That's a good one for avoiding confusion and making sure everyone's aligned.
Right. And finally, they talked about in the loop, which is all about staying informed and involved.
Oh, I use that one all the time. It's essential for good communication and collaboration. We've covered so much ground already.
I have.
But I feel like this is just the beginning. There's always more to learn about business English.
Oh, absolutely. We've laid a good foundation, but there's so much more to explore. More advanced techniques and strategy.
And that's exactly what we'll do in part 2 of this deep dive. Stay tuned.
Can't wait. So welcome back. Ready for more?
I am. Part 1 was Amazing.
Lots to unpack.
It really got me thinking differently about how I approach those business conversations.
Good. So what other gems did that podcast have?
I'm all ears.
Well, one thing they emphasized was being clear and concise,
Okay.
especially in writing, like emails and reports.
Yeah, no one wants to read through a novel to get to the point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Cut to the chase. They recommend using strong verbs, active voice, and, avoiding all that unnecessary jargon.
Oh, yeah, so instead of saying, we are currently endeavoring to finalize the implementation plan,
Right.
you just say, we're finishing the plan.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Direct and impactful.
Much better.
Sounds more confident, too.
It does. I've definitely been guilty of, trying to sound smart and overcomplicating things.
We've all been there.
But simple and clear is the way to go.
Definitely. They also talked about tailoring your language to your audience.
Okay, so knowing when to be formal and when to be more casual.
Exactly. You wouldn't talk to a client the same way you'd talk to a coworker,
Right, like in a text message.
Totally different vibe.
Mhm.
It's about being adaptable and reading the room or, the email or the chat.
So how do you strike that balance?
Well, they suggested paying attention to things like greetings, closings, word choice,
Oh, okay, so like, dear Mr. So-and-so for a formal email.
Right. But for a coworker, maybe just, hi, first name.
It's all in the details.
It shows you're thinking about who you're talking to.
Those are great tips. What else did they talk about?
One thing that surprised me was storytelling.
Storytelling. In business.
I know, right? It sounds weird, but they made a good case for it.
Really?
They said stories can help you connect with your audience on a deeper level,
What?
make your message more memorable and persuasive.
I can see that for presentations or like pitching an idea.
Right.
But how do you use storytelling in like a business proposal or a financial report?
Good point. Well, instead of just showing numbers, you could tell a story about what those numbers mean.
Okay.
Give a real life example.
So if you're talking about a successful product launch,
Yeah. You could share a story about a customer whose life was changed by that product.
that's a great idea. It makes it more human and relatable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they also suggested using metaphors and analogies.
Oh, yeah, to explain complicated ideas.
Yeah. Like if you're describing a new software program,
Right.
instead of getting all technical,
Mhm.
you could use a metaphor to help people visualize it.
Love it.
Yeah.
So we're learning the secrets to good communication one step at a time.
We are. Now, the podcast hosts, they don't just talk about this stuff.
Oh, no.
They did more role-playing to really demonstrate these techniques.
Okay.
This time, they tackled things like phone calls and presentations.
Okay. So like real world scenarios.
Exactly. One scenario was making a professional phone call.
Okay.
They said it's important to be clear and concise even when you don't have those visual cues.
Right. Because on the phone, it's all about your voice.
Exactly. So they suggested starting by stating your purpose really clearly.
Okay.
Like, hi, this is your name from your company. I'm calling to follow up on.
Okay. So everyone knows why you're calling.
Exactly. And then for ending the call, they recommend summarizing those key takeaways.
Okay.
And closing with something polite like, thanks for your time. I look forward to speaking with you again.
Those are good tips.
Uh,
I know I've been guilty of letting phone calls go on too long.
It happens.
What other scenarios did they do?
They also did giving a presentation,
Okay.
talking about engaging the audience, using visuals, and handling questions well.
Those are all important. What about the Q&A part?
Oh yeah, that can be scary. They said one tip is to repeat the question back to the audience
Okay.
so everyone can hear it and it gives you a second to think.
That's a good idea. Sometimes I get flustered when people ask questions.
I know it can be nerve-wracking.
Mm-hmm.
They also said to acknowledge those tough questions
Okay.
and maybe offer to follow up later if you don't have the answer right away.
So you don't have to know everything off the top of your head.
Right. And for ending the presentation, they said, have a strong closing statement.
Okay.
Summarize your main points and leave a lasting impression.
I like that.
And end with a call to action. Encourage your audience to do something.
So it's not just information, it's inspiring action too.
Exactly. Now we can't forget about those business idioms.
Yes, more idioms.
Always more idioms.
Mm.
This time they started with cutting to the chase.
Oh, I love that one. Get to the point.
Exactly.
Mhm.
No time for rambling.
What else?
He talked about going the extra mile.
Oh, yeah. Exceeding expectations.
Exactly. Showing dedication, going above and beyond.
That's so important for building relationships and a good reputation.
It is. They also mentioned win-win situation, which is great for negotiations.
Yeah, finding a solution that works for everyone.
Exactly. Everyone's happy. And finally, they talked about no pain, no gain.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic.
A reminder that success takes effort.
You got to put in the work.
And push through those challenges.
It's like embracing the journey, even when it gets tough.
Exactly. Having that grit and determination. Now, we've covered a lot in this part.
We have.
But there are a few more things we need to talk about.
I'm intrigued. And we're back for the final part of our business English deep dive. I'm feeling pretty inspired to tackle these last few nuances, the ones that can really make a difference.
I'm with you. We've covered so much already. From basic vocab and those go-to phrases to some more advanced techniques.
Right. It's been amazing. But there's always more to learn, right?
Oh, absolutely. Language is always changing.
Yeah, so true. What were some of your biggest takeaways from that podcast? What really stood out to you?
One thing that really hit home was their emphasis on active listening. It's such a basic skill.
Right.
But so many people don't do it well.
I know, it's easy to get caught up in thinking about what you're going to say next.
Yeah.
That you forget to really listen to the other person.
They talked about paying attention to more than just the words.
Oh, yeah.
It's the tone of voice, the body language, all those unspoken cues.
It's like they say communication is mostly nonverbal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Active listening is about being present in the conversation, really engaged.
And making the other person feel heard.
Yes. Like you actually care about what they're saying.
So things like nodding, making eye contact, asking questions.
All part of active listening. It shows you're paying attention.
And it helps build trust and rapport.
Which is crucial in any business setting.
It's all about that connection, that mutual respect. Now, the podcast also touched on nonverbal communication in different cultures.
Oh, yeah, that could be tricky.
A real minefield. What might be polite in one culture could be totally offensive in another.
Exactly. Gestures, eye contact, personal space, it all varies.
I've definitely had those awkward moments where I realized I was doing something wrong.
It happens to the best of us.
It's a reminder to be culturally sensitive.
The podcast hosts really encourage listeners to do their research.
Right, like learn about the customs and communication styles of the people you're working with.
Yeah, even small things can make a difference.
They had a great tip for navigating those cross-cultural interactions.
Oh, yeah.
Observe and mirror the behavior of the people around you.
That's a good one.
It's like learning by example.
And it shows respect for their culture.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I'm realizing that business English is so much more than just grammar and vocabulary.
It's about those soft skills, connecting with people, building relationships, handling those communication challenges with grace.
Being adaptable, culturally aware, and always willing to learn.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's about building that communication toolkit.
Right. The one you can use in any situation.
Whether you're writing an email, leading a meeting, or negotiating a big deal.
I was really impressed by the passion those podcast hosts had for language.
Me too. They really wanted to help people improve their communication.
It was contagious.
They reminded us that learning a language can be fun.
Yeah, even in a business context.
It's about enjoying the journey.
So to everyone out there who's working on their business English,
Keep going.
embrace the challenge, have fun with it, and never stop learning.
You never know where those skills might take you.
That's a great point. Maybe you'll be the one sharing your knowledge and inspiring others someday.
That's the dream.
Well, we've reached the end of our business English deep dive. We hope you've enjoyed it and that you feel ready to take your communication to the next level.
Thanks for joining us. Keep learning, keep exploring, and until next time, keep diving deep into the world of language.